Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Energy Insiders podcast. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Renew Economy and editor of the EV-focused sister site, The Driven.
And don't worry, we're not 2GB. We're not going to have an on-air bust-up, I hope.
Oh, I don't see why not. And not joining me and interrupting me.
Well, I'll tell you why not, because we're not being paid 100 million, or at least if you are, you haven't told me. Sorry.
I'm not going to tell you now on air. Can I introduce you, David? David Leach, ITK Principal. David, I hope you've been behaving yourself while I've been away on holidays, but from the sounds of these interruptions, it doesn't sound like it. But you've got no one to interrupt when you're by yourself, I suppose.
No, I had to concentrate very hard, but I struggled along, and the place was on the verge of falling apart. But thankfully, you're back, Giles, and we're up to we've got an absolutely excellent news interview this week. At least I'm convinced it's excellent. Because it's covering a topic that is one of my part of a topic that's one of my massive themes for this year, and that's electrification of transport. I've written an article pointing out that Australia has a net import oil bill of about $40 billion, which of course is very topical while oil prices are going up at the moment. Now, of course, that's not going to last. But anyway, we've got a great interview, Giles, haven't we?
Well, you have, because you did it, because I've just got off the plane. But let's have a listen to it. Daniel Bleakley, who used to be the chief correspondent for the Driven website, and you caught up with him earlier this week to talk about his new venture.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be talking to Daniel Bleakley, the co-CEO of New Energy Transport, a business that I think we'll find out is focused on heavy vehicle electrification here in the NEM. Thanks very much for joining the podcast, Dan.
Great. Thanks very much for having me, David. I've been a big fan of the podcast, listening to you and Giles for many years. So it's great to finally be on.
Well, hopefully you're still a fan after this discussion.
Yes.
So let's start. What led you and your other co-founder to actually start New Energy Transport?
Well, there was a few things that came together, and I guess one of them is related to Renew Economy, and it was my time working as a reporter for The Driven, actually. So I was covering what's happening around the world in the electric vehicle space, what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the policy space, what's happening in associated technologies like vehicle to grid and battery technology, and eventually started covering electric trucks. And it was a incredible privilege to be able to report on all these amazing things happening in the transition space, as I'm sure you're aware. But I started to think, geez, I'd love to really be part of it in a business sense as well. And I was also consulting to an electric truck startup company in Melbourne, an electric truck charging station startup. And I met my co-founder through that. He was also consulting, and my business partner, his name's Frederick Powson, my co-CEO. He is the former head of innovation for Scania Trucks, which I'm sure most of your listeners have heard the brand Scania, a major Swedish truck manufacturer. And Frederick has worked in the automotive space his whole career, and he was the head of innovation for about 5 years with Scania, and was involved in
you two hit it off.
We did, yeah. And Frederick was involved in several major electric truck pilot programs in Sweden. So he has an incredible experience in the space.
So you thought, let's start it up, and you continue a long tradition of journalists who move into businesses. But I don't know that it always ends well. If I think about Chris Skase or even Boris Johnson, but hopefully, well, let's see how we go there.
Yep.
And so New Energy Transport was set up, and what's its objective?
So basically, again, as I'm sure most of your listeners will know, that at a fundamental level, electric vehicles and electric trucks are capable of operating at a lower cost.
Excuse me,
than
I have to bust. I now remember that Winston Churchill was a journalist as well, and probably
Was
a
he?
lot of others I've left out. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. So yeah, just to frame it up. So as I was saying, at a fundamental level, all electric vehicle owners know that EVs are capable of operating at a lower cost. They're more efficient than internal combustion based vehicles, and that's true in the trucking space as well. However, while the technology exists to electrify road freight, the existing industry value chain makes unlocking those efficiency gains very, very difficult.
So I think
And
actually we did, not to cut a long story short, but we did actually cover this when we talked to Zenobi some time back, and they had like about 30 Volvos. Well, they don't have, but Volvo that were doing like intra-city little runs around Sydney essentially, and they built a charging station to cope with that. Let's just talk about some numbers here, because I love talking about numbers, and it's a great opportunity to make some mistakes. That's what usually happens after I've been talking about them for a while. But as far as I can see, that diesel trucks do about what 2 litres a kilometre or something. Maybe it's not quite that. It works to about $1 a kilometre or something like that. Is that the kind of number we should talk?
around that ballpark, yeah.
And we're not just talking little trucks here. We're talking about your B doubles, the things that zoom up and down the Sydney to Melbourne corridor, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. And it's probably important to caveat the discussion around economics that there's a very broad range of freight tasks, ranging from last mile delivery, moving 5 tons, doing 100 kilometers a day, where the driver cost is the major cost component and the fuel cost is relatively small, all the way up to high volume, high productivity line haul, where you're doing 1,000 kilometers a day and burning through a lot of energy.
I think 200,000 kilometres a year is the number we're going to talk about. And even though your truckie, your humble truckie probably costs you a fair bit per year with the on costs, it's still a minor part of that total cost. And that's the part that probably when most people think about electric trucks, they think the hardest bit. So, but just hanging on with the numbers there, we got to $1 a kilometre for diesel. Now for electrics, I reckon you talk. Have I heard you talk about something like 15 cents a kilowatt hour for the electricity?
Well, based on our modelling, we believe that we can get down to around 15 cents a kilowatt hour for the energy cost. Yeah.
That's a fantastic number, and no doubt some eyebrows will go up when they think about that, when they think about their household electricity cost. But let's not worry about it. And I think it's something like 2 kilowatt hours per kilometre for one of these great big heavy trucks.
Yeah, so we do have some test numbers on that. We recently did a 480 kilometer single charge delivery with a 36-ton gross combined mass. We went from Picton, just south of Sydney, all the way up to Beresfield near Newcastle and back. And we used the Windrose truck for that particular demonstration. We averaged around 1.25 kilowatt hours per kilometer. So the whole trip used around 600 kilowatt hours to go 480 kilometers. So we understand that for a B double in on the order of like a 64 ton, you would be in between 1.5 and as you say 2 kilowatt hours.
Yeah. And so that would still give you, with your 15 cents a kilowatt hour, something less than 30 cents to go a kilometre compared to $1 for diesel.
That's right. So at a fundamental level, you've got, as with a lot of fossil fuel related industries, you have a very low capex, high opex, diesel based industry. So you buy a truck for $250,000, and then you run it doing line haul, and you spend $2 million over around 10 years. And what electrification is the opposite. It's a high capex, low opex model. So it does cost more upfront. You pay more for the truck, you pay more for the infrastructure, but you're then able to dramatically reduce the operating cost or the energy cost.
And when I look at Sydney to Melbourne, and I did a little research on this, and apparently there's some discussion that it's like 20 million tonnes gets moved a year between Sydney and Melbourne, and that's around about 700,000 B-double movements a year. And it's something I'm just quoting these numbers here, so you're just going to have to. I bet you haven't been thinking about these numbers yourself, but it's about, if I'm right, and the research I read is correct, it's about, and I think it is roughly right, it's about 1.2 billion truck kilometres.
I mean, that sounds plausible, and yeah, I haven't looked at those particular numbers, but some other high level numbers is that, there's around just under 4,000 heavy articulated trucks on the Hume Highway every day, so that probably checks out.
I think it'd be even more than that. I think you'd need around about 6,000 trucks to move your 20 million tonnes. Now, 6,000 of those things is quite a lot when you start to think about the charging infrastructure, isn't it?
That's right. So there's an enormous amount of energy that's going to be needed to electrify Australia's heavy road freight, and some back of napkin numbers is that it's going to add 20%, on the order of 20% to the national electricity market. However, there are huge co-benefits to how this gets rolled out, and one of the big ones is that the energy gets used in regional areas where it will be generated, essentially. And we can get into other discussions around the way that these sites will be set up, and the way that the use of on-site batteries, the potential use of vehicle to grid. So we talk about these fleets of trucks. Each truck has between 500 and 700 kilowatt hours. So if you've got a fleet of 100 trucks, you've essentially got 60 megawatt hours of battery capacity on wheels, which is, again, as most of your listeners will know, that's about half the original South Australian big battery, which is now a small battery, but nonetheless an enormous amount of capacity. And then when you couple that with the wholesale electricity market, you get all kinds of possibilities. So, at a very high level, you've got the transport sector and the electricity sector have been completely separate for the last 100 years, completely oblivious to each other almost. And now, through the electrification of passenger vehicles, but more so with the electrification of heavy road freight, we're going to see the convergence of the electricity sector and the transport sector, and how they converge and where they converge is going to be fascinating to see. I
just want to mention that, in fact, we've always had electric, or for a long time, electric trains, and so we do have electrification of transport. Never mind the electric push bikes and things as well. So, but I want to concentrate. Obviously, we are talking about heavy vehicles, and I actually want to focus on the Sydney to Melbourne corridor, because it's something where the annual energy savings are so big that it's worth this topic all in itself. But maybe we should step out a little bit and note that I think transport is about the second biggest source of carbon emissions after electricity. And as the emissions within electricity come down, transport will become the biggest source of emissions. And then we get onto the other things that have got everyone hot and bothered at the moment. That is the annual import cost of diesel and oil, which we've just been talking about indirectly. And also, of course, the security risk. I think you posted on LinkedIn that, in fact, we have one of the longest diesel food distribution chains in the world. And when you think about it, that's quite a risk, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is something that a lot of people have been talking about for some time. But this week, really, the world has changed, and we're now witnessing, I think, it's fair to say we're witnessing a global energy crisis playing out in real time. And I think it's putting a lot of focus on our energy security, and in particular, our, let's call it transport energy security. So some other numbers, Australia is the second most road freight dependent country on earth after the US. Our entire road freight system runs on diesel, and we import around 30 billion litres of diesel every year. And around 90% of that diesel we use around 30 billion litres a year, and we import around 90% is imported, either as refined diesel or as crude oil for some of the refining's done here. So we are extremely exposed to the global oil market, and when we talk about road freight, it's kind of, it's not just trucks; it's actually our entire food supply chain that we're talking about here. So you've got the transportation of food from primary producers in regional Australia to processing plants, through to distribution centres, and then eventually out to all the supermarkets. And everyone sees it when you go on the highways. There are a lot of trucks out there, and there's an extremely complicated network of
Let's
of road.
just take that as a fact, because I don't think anyone's going to argue with that at all. And let's come back to this economics of electrifying just the Sydney to Melbourne transport corridor. And I could put it up the cost of it against the cost of a very fast train to Newcastle, but and I might even get to that if we get to time. But for those people who can remember back to earlier in the conversation, we said that the diesel cost of going a kilometre is $1, and the electrified cost is about 30 cents. So every kilometre you're saving about 70 cents. And I'm saying there's about 1.2 billion of those kilometres a year. So if it was all electrified, the net fuel saving would be in the order of $800 million to $1 billion per year. You don't want to. That's what I'm saying. Now, we then have to look at the other side of that, as you said at the outset, Dan, is that there's all the capex, the extra capex involved, and I think, even though batteries are coming down, what can you say about the capital cost of a electric B double versus your traditional diesel?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to talk about here. I think generally electric prime movers are around double the cost.
So double means what? $500,000.
So you're probably looking at around $500,000 for these top end prime movers, and I would say you can kind of split them into two groups. So you've got your ground up built electric trucks, and I actually have a model of the Windrose here. So
Windrose is a Chinese company, isn't it?
That's right. So Windrose is a startup electric truck manufacturer. They have a 729 kilowatt hour prime mover, and this is what we call a ground up design.
Next, I'll be showing my photo of me sitting in a Volvo equivalent of those that I got from Smart Energy last year, but we haven't got time. It's a nice photo. Right. It's a nice model. That it is. My grandkids. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no worries. Well, and then I was going to say, so the difference is a lot of the traditional legacy OEMs like Volvo and Scania and MAN, they essentially, most of their models are essentially retrofitted diesel truck architecture trucks. So they're basically keeping the same frame, and then they're working in the batteries or fitting them in how they can. Now, the problem with this is that you're not getting the clean slate first principles design benefits that you get.
I think we all understand that with electric cars. I mean,
yeah.
An electric Mercedes that someone just put a battery in, and because it has a nice badge, it must be good.
Sure. And I mean, it's great for passenger cars, but it means a lot more in the trucking context, because that's where, energy and range and that really matters. If you can get double the range out of a a ground up truck, then it's a huge differentiator.
So
So
that 36-ton truck went about, what was the return trip from Picton to Newcastle?
yeah, so that was a 480 kilometers round trip. And yeah, I can talk a bit more about that because we had some other fascinating outcomes from that trip. And so we did that with a company called Multiquip, which is a poultry company based in Picton. And one of the really exciting outcomes was that we actually saved 40 minutes of time compared to their regular average time with a diesel truck. And the reason we were able to save that much time was because the electric truck is able to maintain the speed limit going uphill.
Yes.
And we had a sense that we would see some improvement on time, but we had no idea it would be this dramatic. And so basically the driver, his name's Tom, he finished the trip, and we went and chatted to him, and he said that he got pulled into the weighbridge on the way back because they had checked his speed, and he was traveling unusually fast for a truck. He was still under the speed limit, so he was at like 98, 99 kilometers an hour. But being able to maintain that speed up hills, yeah, they wiped 40 minutes off the time. Now, I've got something else to mention about this is that currently with these heavy diesel operations, often the drivers will slow down to 90 kilometers an hour because you've got the resistance on the truck is obviously squared. So you can save fuel by dropping, you can save quite a bit of fuel from dropping from 100 to 90 Ks an hour.
All of us cyclists know that. The resistance goes up at the square of the speed increase. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the economics of diesel trucking and high productivity diesel or high weight or high productivity diesel trucking is that it often makes sense to drop it back because you save more in energy cost than you lose in driver wage time, right? That's how big the energy cost is in the cost stack. Now, when you are running on low cost renewable energy, that metric actually flips. So now it makes more sense to go faster, even though you're using more energy. That energy is costing less, and then you're saving more on the driver wage.
Yeah, I think going from 80 to 100 kilometers an hour with a BW, I did some research and would take about 15% more energy. But as you say, on a Sydney to Melbourne trip, you might knock an hour off the trip if you were lucky. And you add that up by, however many 700,000 movements a year. That's a lot of hours saved for the national economy. That almost sounds like productivity. Now,
it does sound like productivity, and there's a bit of talk about productivity at the moment.
There is a productivity, energy security, oil import costs, inflation, all these things we're talking about. And here's an answer that can save $1 billion a year, never mind the 20 million tons of carbon reduction we could get as well, and it's a very achievable. But so we talked about the capex, and if we said we need 6,000 trucks and they cost like $250,000 more each, that's the incremental cost. Well, we can all do our sums on that. That's about $1.5 billion of capex, right? Which versus $1 billion a year of fuel saving. We're looking pretty good at this point. Payback less than 2 years. But we've got to allow for all the charging infrastructure, haven't we? Now, you can tell me, how much is it going to cost? How should I think about charging infrastructure? I think the key to it is you do need very dedicated, relatively large known installations where you can have all your bays and a cafe and a sleep out and stuff, and make a kind of destination place for truckies. And it's going to have a lot of power. I mean, if you've got 50 bays, you might want to have 30, and you want to charge the 20. Once you really get going, you might want 30 or 40 megawatts going in there, mightn't you?
That's right. We're seeing some monster sites get built in China. I think there's a 100 megawatt site over there now, trucking site. But you're right. But our model isn't based on shared use truck charging facilities. So ours is a vertically integrated model. It's like a closed loop where we basically, our depots charge our own. We'll charge our own trucks.
You won't own the trucks though, will you?
We're going to own the whole system basically. Yeah.
What's the whole system here? You're sounding like Donald Trump now. Sorry.
So our model is a first principles approach to electric trucking, where we take a first principles approach to the location of the site, the layout of the site, and the operations, all from an electric trucking perspective. We're not trying to retrofit an electric technology over the top of an existing diesel operation, existing infrastructure. That's very difficult to do.
So you'll own or lease the site, build the charging infrastructure, and then you'll either own or lease the trucks and then rent the trucks to some customer. Is that how it works?
Well, we actually plan on our product will be to sell zero emission road freight to transport buyers at the same cost as diesel freight. That's our value proposition.
Yeah. So you're going to become a trucking company.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, we will be a trucking company.
So you would get someone like a Coles or a Woolworths, and they would contract with you to just pick up all the loads and deliver them.
That's basically it. And this we landed on this model because for several reasons, but it's there are a lot of complexities in trying to set up a shared use truck charging station. You say you have a truck charging depot and you're looking for customers. Now I might be a trucking company. My trucks might charge at 100 kilowatts. Someone else's trucks might charge at 400 kilowatts. So my trucks are going to sit in your charging bay for 4 times the time that the other company will. You also don't know when I'm going to be coming in. I might have just got a new contract, so you're not really aware of my operations. So that makes it very difficult to predict, what these operations are going to look like across multiple companies.
Even Claude would struggle. Sorry, keep going.
That's right. Claude would struggle. So our model is basically to vertically integrate that, control, what kind of trucks control our charges. So what is the charging infrastructure that we're using? What kind of on-site battery capacity? What trucks are we using? What are our operations? When we take on a new job, we know how much capacity we've got, because ultimately the constraint here is going to be power. And how that's optimized.
So the power's one thing, but it's also quite a big budget exercise because I've been talking the Sydney to Melbourne corridor, and even at 400 kilometres, and that's with 36 tonnes, at more like 250 kilometres, with like 66 tonnes. You'd be charging a couple of times to get to Melbourne, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, we did 480 with 36 tons, but the Windrose has done 670 kilometers on overseas trials with a 49 ton. So, and the battery capacity is continuing to improve. So, we think there are truck ranges on the order of in excess of 700 kilometers in.
You're still going to need 2 stops, a stop to get to Melbourne.
You'll need to stop for a toilet break before you'll run out of charge. Let's say
that's my experience in the Hyundai or the Xpeng already. Yes, I agree with that.
Yes, and you obviously have mandatory stopping requirements for truck drivers as well. So we think the technology is there, that the mandatory stopping requirements are the constraint, not the battery capacity.
That's very interesting. But all the same, how can I put this? You're not going to start by building a charging station halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, are you? And just go for that route straight away? What's the plan?
So the plan is to start with our first hub, our first depot between Sydney and Wollongong. So it's called the Wilton project, and we've chosen that as our first location because it's on the intersection of the Hume Highway and Picton Road. Well, it's not for you. It's not directly on the intersection, but it's in the vicinity.
I know that spot. I used to drive down and go to Picton for model plane flying and come back again. But so I know that turn off well. But sorry, I'm interrupting again.
Well, that Picton Road, I sat. So Picton Road, there's around 5,000 trucks a day on Picton Road. So that corner of the world is arguably the densest road freight corridor in the country. And I have firsthand experienced that because I sat by the road for 12 hours and counted trucks one day to see what was going up and down there, and there's a lot of trucks going down there.
That reminds me, Dan, I keep interrupting. It must be I must not have had enough pills today, but it reminds me of when I was in investment banking and we had the guy in London who was a bit full of himself and he wanted some research on Telstra, which was coming up for an IPO that day. And now, very smart, later my boss, who was the telcos analyst and had just taken over the job and didn't really know that much himself, but wasn't going to tell this guy that, he sent him over a copy of the white pages and said, well, here's the customer list.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
So
Nothing beats first-hand research.
So you're going to build at Wilton, but I mean, there's not a lot of trucks at Wilton, but not a lot of shops. I mean, what are all these trucks going to be delivering to?
Well, the reason we've chosen that is that we're positioning ourselves in between Sydney and the Illawarra region. So our operating model is that we'll be looping up and down between Wollongong and Sydney. So we can basically do, we think we can do 2 of those loops on a single charge. We can do one if we need to, but we also believe that we can actually loop in and out of Canberra from that single depot. So, but they're basically operating models on these loops. So having one depot being able to service that entire region.
So the trucks will charge at. It still sounds a bit confusing to me. The trucks will charge at Wilton. They'll pick up stuff in Sydney, come down to Wilton and charge, and go on to Canberra. Or I mean, how do you see the freight actually move? If they charge at Wilton, drive up to Sydney, pick something up, and then where do they take it? I mean, they're not going to be picking up or unloading at Wilton, are they?
No, that's right. So there'll be different, many different operations, but say a typical one could be running from Port Kembla up to Sydney and back, and doing that twice in a shift. So the driver might do one loop in the morning, come into the depot, park up, charge for an hour, have lunch, maybe charging in the middle of the day when all that beautiful cheap solar energy is coming onto the grid, jump back in the truck and do the second loop in the afternoon. So that's basically our operating model.
Yes, or he could do could he do Sydney to Canberra?
Can do Sydney to Canberra as well. So that may involve a loop into Sydney and then a charge, and then a loop into Canberra and back, and then a charge. So that way you're actually charging each time you're passing the
depot.
Yep. But generally we believe with the Sydney Wollongong you wouldn't need to charge each time. You could probably do 2 loops there.
And I guess this would make a lot more sense if after Wilton you were to have another stop further south, so that with the 2 stops you could actually do the whole Sydney to Melbourne route.
That's right. That's the dream. We want to be the first company in Australia to do full electrified line haul between Sydney and Melbourne. And again, that's where the economics gets even better. The more energy that's being used, the better it gets for electric trucks.
Well, I'd say the less empty loads you're going to be carrying, because I do think myself, starting at Wilton, the trucks will be empty quite a bit of the time, but I don't know anything about transport. That's why I'm a building materials analyst or electricity analyst. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating industry. I'm relatively new to it as well, but I've learned a lot from my business partner Frederick, who's been at his whole career, and it's really fascinating industry.
So if we were coming back to this overall story, we're saving 70 cents a kilometre, which on the entire fleet that moves between Sydney and Melbourne of these B doubles, I reckon comes to something close to $1 billion a year of potential fuel savings. I reckon you've got $1 billion or $2 billion of extra truck costs as the old trucks roll out and you replace them with new extra electric ones. What do you reckon the charging infrastructure is going to cost all up? I mean, I have my own view about it. What did I reckon? I reckon it's going to cost another couple of $1 billion to put all the charging infrastructure in place to move, say, 6,000 B doubles up and down that Sydney to Melbourne route.
So I haven't done the macro stuff, but we've definitely spent a lot of time modeling our depot and our operations. And yeah, we believe that this really works. The economics really works with this. Yeah.
So, I mean, would you'll be getting what, 20, 50, 100 trucks to start with, 10 trucks? How are you thinking?
So our plan is, and we'll probably have some announcements on this in the coming weeks. But our plan is to start with 20 electric prime movers. But the initial depot will be the infrastructure on the depot will support up to 50 trucks. And we've designed the site in a way that it'll be able to actually be able to scale up over time to potentially 150 or 200 trucks.
Yes, that's right. And I was doing it takes about an hour to charge one of these trucks.
That's right. So one of the other interesting things is there's obviously been a move to battery swapping, and we've seen companies like Janus who are doing great retrofits, and that you are seeing a lot of battery swapping in China, and those models definitely have their use cases. We are focused on high speed charging, and in particular, we're quite excited about megawatt charging. There are megawatt charging stations that are starting to roll out in Europe, and the MCS standard. Again, your listeners will be familiar with the CCS passenger vehicle standard. Then you've got the MCS megawatt charging standard, which provides speeds in excess of 1,000 kilowatts, and we'll have bidirectional capability as well.
So, in a 50 stall thing, if it was all full, you'd need 50 megawatts. But let's say 30 megawatts if it was, 2/3 full or something.
Yeah, so we will start with 12 high-powered charging bays, and each bay, with the way that we have designed it, is that each bay will support a full A double, or two single combinations end to end. So
Sorry,
we
A
actually,
double for what's an A double?
sorry, an A double is a prime mover with two full length trailers, and a single is obviously just a single trailer. So we're designing our site so that it's flexible, so that the bays can take a full A double trailer, or can have two single trailer combinations end to end. So we actually end up having two charging dispensers per bay. So we have 12 bays, but we actually have 24 dispensers.
So on that basis, if they were all full, hopefully, that's 12 megawatts or something, is it?
That's right, and that's where you have to get creative with on-site batteries. So we're looking at a 5 megawatt grid connection, and likely a 10 megawatt on-site battery, and that combination would enable us to deliver a megawatt or close to a megawatt to each bay temporarily during peak periods. But then, so there will be ebbs and flows. But it's basically enabling your site to be able to support those peak periods.
But not to run continuously.
That's right. Well, there's kind of two calculations. There's what's your total energy requirements for the whole operation each day, and then what is your peak? What is your likely peak load?
And just out of interest, does the site have the potential to expand the grid connection eventually?
It does. Yes. Yes, we do have the potential to increase the grid connection over time. We understand. Yeah.
And thinking again, big picture, have you already identified, not even having started or even got the go ahead for the first site? But I'm focused on this. I'm thinking if I'm the federal minister who wants to make an impact. I could build this Sydney to Newcastle very fast train, which will cost, I don't know, 50 billion. I can't even remember what the number is. Or I could spend 2 billion and electrify Sydney to Newcastle transport and get it done. How quickly could you get it done? I reckon if there was a war on, and there nearly is, we could probably get it done in about 5 years, couldn't we?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to turn this into a competition between trains and trucks, electric trucks, because
No, but I
very
but
much
but I
in
think the
favour of
cost.
electric.
But I think I'm in favour of electric trains too. Don't get me wrong. But I do look at the highest return on investment. That's what us investment banking analysts are trained to do.
Yeah.
Where can I make money now? Right this second. And it does seem to me this is a pretty big opportunity. So I guess my question was going to be: you've identified your first site and done a lot of planning. How's the planning for the second site going?
We do have our eye on what would be the next site, or the area, I guess. There are there are a few metrics that you look at. It's obviously got to be near a dense road freight corridor. It's got to have good access to power. We have a sense of where the second site and potentially the third site would go. But really, all of our focus at the moment is getting this first one off the ground.
That's right. And we sort of talked a little bit about the capital costs. What can you say about how the budget for your first site?
So I probably can't say too much at this stage, but I probably could say that there are OEMs in this space that are in the electrification of trucking space in particular, that are very excited about our business model and the potential that it has to really transform the economics. And if you can transform the economics, and we believe we can reduce the overall cost of heavy road freight by 20%. And if we can achieve that, we think that this business model has the potential to really scale significantly. And yeah, we have some fantastic partners that are working on this with us now, and can really see the longer term vision for it.
That's right. So you think there will be some money around for it one way or another?
I think there's going to have. I think there'll have to be, David, especially given what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah. I get that, but there's a lot of difference between what there has to be and what you're going to get tomorrow, if I can put it that way. At
Sure.
least in my personal experience.
Sure. No, absolutely. But I really believe there's a lot of momentum behind this now. And again, when you think about the integration with the electricity grid, and the possibilities there are enormous.
Well, is there anything else you want? We've covered a lot of territory, possibly more than I might have thought we were going to. I ran out of dad jokes. I didn't have that many to start with. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners?
Well, I'd like to just talk about some of the other benefits. So our
Because drivers must love it, don't they? I mean, I know this is one of the things when we looked into the Zenobē thing. The drivers, once they get the hang of it, they like that it's so much smoother and more comfortable. I mean, they're spending a lot of their life in this bloody cabin.
Absolutely, and that's what I was about to mention, was that the driver Tom, who was the driver for our demonstration run, we interviewed him. Well, so if your listeners are interested, we have a video on our website it's a 5-minute video that covers the whole demonstration, and we have interviews with the driver after the demo. And Tom, total convert by the end of driving it, and he actually said that he suffers from industrial deafness from driving trucks for 20 years. Sitting on top of a large diesel engine for
So do
14
I
hours.
when I have to do the washing up, but go on.
There you go. But this is a real issue, right? And there are thousands of drivers out there that would be suffering from industrial deafness, suffering from exposure to diesel particulate every single day. And this electrification of trucking will be a total game changer for their lives, and for our communities in our cities. At the moment, the most efficient trucks end up running between cities, and the older ones get passed down, and they end up doing the lower kilometer runs, which are actually in the city. So perversely, we end up with most polluting trucks in the cities. And, there's plenty of research out there now showing that communities that are living on dense, road freight corridors suffer significantly higher asthma rates. The noise pollution's linked to hypertension and cardiovascular disease. So, the faster that we can get on with this transition and electrify our cars, electrify our trucks, there's just, incredible future ahead.
Dan Bleakley, thanks very much for talking to us. I hope we can come back and talk in a year or two and talk about how successful your business is. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's one of my themes for this year is electrification for transport. As I said wrote in a note, there's $40 billion of oil imports net per year that we can replace. That's an easy win in Australia. It's an easy win. And the incremental capital cost of doing it's not that high. And probably the best return on investment's not even in EVs. It may well be in stuff like long-distance road hauling and save a security issue as well. So thanks again for explaining it all to us. Been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You are listening to the Energy Insiders podcast with Giles Parkinson and David Leach. And David, it's pretty interesting stuff that Daniel's got himself involved with there. And you're pretty excited, I think, by some of the economics that are emerging from this transition.
Well, why I got excited, because as I said, electrification of transport is one of my big themes, and the carbon benefits are important because after electricity, transport is the biggest source of emissions in Australia. But fortunately, with transport, we can actually put that to one side because the economic benefits and the strategic benefits are so strong. You don't even need to talk about carbon reductions, as important as they are. And we're already seeing this. I mean, thanks, I suppose, in part to the electric vehicle policies that were introduced by Chris Bowen, the fuel emission standards. This month in February, EV share of total private vehicle registrations, excluding dual cab utes and things, is up to about, I think, 15 or 16%. And if you include plug-ins, it's over 20% now, or something like that, of new vehicle sales in February had a plug. So that's one thing. We've all talked about EVs and the need for charging infrastructure for passengers, for consumers, till we're blue in the face, and we'll keep doing so. But trucking, if a couple of years ago, if you'd asked people about semi-trailers, you would have had a roll of your eyebrows and the discussion about hydrogen. And then someone might have showed you a photo of Elon Musk's cyber semi, or whatever he calls it this week.
Well, there's the Cybertruck, and then there's the semi.
Excuse me. And it was a concept that, one day might be reality. And then I turn around and start talking to Daniel and doing some research. And I work out that, to drive a 60-ton semi-trailer costs you, at yesterday's or a week ago's oil price, about $1. And if you can buy your electricity for 15 cents a kilowatt hour, it costs 30 cents to do the same kilometre with electricity, right? So that you're saving, it's $1 and a bit versus 30 cents. It's a third of the price. Now, sure, you have to pay more for the semi-trailers, about double the price, and you've got to build these charging infrastructure. And I thought the charging infrastructure, megawatt charging, was a pretty big. But it turns out there's a whole global standard, the megawatt charging standard, MCS. Giles, you'd be fully up on that one, wouldn't you?
Well, I would be, wouldn't I?
And as we saw from the interview that you weren't here that we did with Laurie Miliverta last week, talking about China, and when I researched that, you find that, and he published some stats at CREF showing that China's now selling about 200,000 electric semi-trailers a year within China, or producing. And it's 1 million electric trucks a year, and about 200,000 buses a year. But 200,000 electric trucks a year, it's proven technology. Huawei, or how do you pronounce it?
Huawei, yes.
Yeah, that one. Has a 100 megawatt charging station. Like, the input power is 100 megawatts. And that's been open now. And they've got bays in there where you can charge at a megawatt. So what you find, and you also find there's this rival to the Tesla Semi. You could probably remember the name of it better than I do. A new Chinese truck company that's only been out for 4 years. I'm going to publish an article about it, about them, and Fully Charged. If you're interested, did a couple of great video interviews.
Windross, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, Windrose. And that truck has a 700 kilowatt hour battery. They claim it can drive 650 kilometres on a single charge, and it's been proven in Australia to drive 450 kilometres. It goes up the hills as fast as it goes on the flat, so 100 kilometres an hour. With the result,
and that's surprised a few of the truckies out there.
It did, and it didn't just surprise the truckies. The truck got pulled in by the Weybridge people on suspicion of speeding. It did.
Well, yeah, because they do like average.
And they didn't work out. They didn't understand how a truck could stick to the speed limit and do the average, but it did. So there's time savings. The truckies don't go deaf because they're not sitting on top of a motor for most of their working life.
That's making tired.
But the real point here, from the truck owner's point of view, from the shipping, from the freighting companies, if you're a Coles or a Woolworths, all of a sudden you can get a payback from these electric trucks if we had the charging infrastructure in place on this 900 kilometre route. Right, it's one stop. The driver's got to stop anyway for at least half an hour on that 10-hour trip, and probably a bit more. In that 1 hour he stops, you can charge the truck up. And all of a sudden, it's a one stop, 1 hour, and it's costing you a third of the fuel costs. So when you work it out, if you're retiring your diesel trucks and replacing them with these electric things, adding in the cost of the charging infrastructure, the payback is 2 years. And if we electrified every last tonne of that 22 million tonnes, that's a fuel saving of about $900 million a year. I mean, that's productivity, Giles. That's the sort of thing that Jim Chalmers and Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese ought to be falling over themselves to actually grab with both hands. And then, Sydney to Brisbane, Sydney to Newcastle, it's easy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But we've been sort of presented with, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year paybacks with so many other technologies, and we just don't take them up. I mean, I still think we probably need a bit of extra push from the government. I think, if you go to Europe now, you find cities that say, no, sorry, if you're a diesel truck, you're not coming into the city centre or even anywhere close to it. And
that's one thing. But yes, here, the economics are just out of them. I agree with all those other points, but it's the economics, right? This is going to take off. If Windross was a publicly listed company, you'd be looking at it very seriously, very, very seriously.
No, it's interesting stuff. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, that was a great interview with Daniel. Thank you very much for doing that, David. Look, what else have we has happened? Look, I only just got off the plane, admittedly.
Well, the other thing that's happened or hasn't happened is that Queensland has proved once again that they'd be perfectly happy in Donald Trump's cabinet. They're a real marga bunch up there, and they're proving it every day. And they're going to go backwards. I spend a lot of time. Sorry, I'm quite excited this week, Giles.
I'm not, and that's really good because I know nothing.
But I spend a lot of time doing electricity price modelling to a quite professional standard. I don't know if you know these companies like Baringa and Aurora that produce the price forecasts for all the new wind and solar developers. I've spent the last couple of years working with someone else. I don't want to talk about it much on here, but the point is I do a ton of modelling to a very high standard, or at least I think it's a high standard, a professional standard, pretty much. And it shows that Queensland's going to be in trouble in the 1930s as their coal stations come to an end if they don't build a shitload of technology, because they've only got one connection to New South Wales, and it's a pretty limited connection. So they've got to do everything internally. And as I've been banging on to you and anyone else that would listen, including the Mirror, for years and years and years, the bigger the wind and solar portfolio, the lower it costs. The smaller the portfolio, generally speaking, the more expensive on a unit basis it is, because the more firming you've got to do. And that's got implications for data centres. I mean, data centres shouldn't have to do their own firming or their own electricity. What they should do is all be shareholders in a big electricity company that has a massive portfolio. and they buy a share. If it's a 10,000 megawatt portfolio, they buy, and they need 1,000 megawatts, as if any data center in Australia is going to need that in the foreseeable future. Then they buy 1,000 megawatts worth of it, and they'll get a lower price. But the point is, Queensland's getting isolated. They're cutting everyone off. They're calling in things like batteries for quite ridiculous reasons. And
Yeah, well, the latest one, two this week, actually. The new Gin one has been sort of advised that it may be called in. That happened probably a week ago, I think. And then they formally called in the one that Potentia is building up near Bouldercombe. So on the basis that it could endanger the barrier reef, as this is.
I mean, like global warming doesn't, ocean warming, ocean acidification, that doesn't damage the barrier reef. Clean energy in the barrier reef, coal runoff from sugarcane. I mean, what's the list that you want me to run through?
Yes, no need to convince me, David. No, it's just actually, it's just completely, utterly nuts. And in contrast to what we're actually seeing in New South Wales, which we've seen a few interesting developments this week.
State significant developments.
Yeah, no, that's really important. That should fast track 17, or at least help make sure that 17 different sort of wind and solar developments and battery.
Well, not just them, but property and stuff. But do you understand, Giles, this West Wind's got one out at Wentworth. Now, Put your hand up if you know where Wentworth actually is. I've been to a model plane competition. It's out there. It's on the course. It was lovely, but it's out past.
It's near the Murray River, isn't it?
Yeah, it's past Mildura, right? There's not a hell of a lot of demand out there for 1,000 megawatts of wind, and you do wonder where how they're going to get the transmission from A to B. But anyway, it's state significant development.
Yep, and they've also, I think the planning minister's come out this week as well and made a ruling that 3 of the wind farms, particularly the ones in the Southwest Renewable Zone, which have got grid connections or grid capacity allocations, cannot be taken to court. I mean, there's a bit of a ridiculous process going on now where you get these long distance objectors, forcing them to review to the Independent Planning Commission, and someone sort of puts up their hand. And anyway, so look, that's interesting. So it's just a contrast. The 2 biggest coal states in the country, New South Wales is at least seemingly making an effort to accelerate the process. They've got their submissions completed in for the new design of the Tesla, which will take in solar hybrids. They're doing a lot of work to try and accelerate the rollout of renewables so they can have no further delays beyond.
The big wind farms have to be approved this year. We've had that discussion. I won't have it again. But I mean, this the negative attitude in Queensland and the positive one in New South Wales, we already see that showing up. ASHI owners sacked about, I think I read in the Financial Review, something like about 400 of their engineering staff, and I make a small bet that many of them were devoted to working on projects like the follow-on to McIntyre in Queensland. And Queensland's negative attitude has probably been quite a driver there.
Yeah, well done, Queensland. Yes.
Let's get rid of 400 skilled jobs for the future, whilst ruining the future for our grandchildren. Jarabaj's kids are going to turn around and look at him and think, what the heck? But anyway, we shouldn't go there.
Yes. What the heck? Yes, maybe you should have stuck with Elvis Presley impersonations, but there you go.
And that's about it for this week, is it, Giles?
I think that's a good way to end, actually. It's possibly a safe way to end. Might not be a safe way to end. David, thank you very much for filling in while I was away. Thank you very much for the interviews you did with Laurie Miller-Verta and this week with Daniel Bleakley. We've got a couple of other really good interviews coming up in the next couple of weeks, so look forward to reintegrating myself into the publication in this podcast and sounding a bit more informed next time. But thank you very much. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Pylon and Evergen. Do check out our other podcasts, the Driven podcast, the Solar Insiders podcast, and the Switched On.
And the Cooking in the Kitchen with David podcast. Oh, no, we haven't released that yet, have we?
You've blown the embargo on that, David. It's very disappointing. Thank you very much. We'll be back again next week. Bye for now.